Welcome to IoT Real Talk. No fluff, no filler, just real pros talking about real programs, real challenges, and real results.
Nearly half of enterprises say security is their top barrier to scaling cellular IoT, and lack of visibility is a big reason why. When it comes to IoT security, you can't protect what you can't see. Blind spots across devices, networks, and data flows raise risks, drive up costs, and slow growth. In this episode of IoT Real Talk, we are joined by Steffen Sorrell, Chief of Research at Kaleido Intelligence, to explore why visibility is the missing link in cellular IoT security, how new global regulations are redefining what IoT security means, and what enterprises can do right now to build trusted IoT programs that scale. Stay tuned to find out how visibility is redefining IoT security. Hello, everyone. I'm your co-host, Susanna Song, Chief Marketing Officer at Eris. And John has taken the day off, so let's get right to our guest, Steffen Sorrell. Good to have you on the pod.
Yeah, good to be on here. Thanks for having me, Susanna.
Yeah, so Steffen, tell us a little bit about Kaleido Intelligence and more about what you're doing there at the firm.
Yeah, so we're quite a young analyst house. So I'm one of the co-founders. We started back in 2019, and we're really specialized in mobile connectivity, specifically the world of roaming. We're extremely well connected. So my purview is IoT roaming in that context, as well as really taking a deep dive into what's happening in the world of cellular IoT. So we do a lot of benchmarking and alongside the typical market sizing and examining various verticals in that context.
Very good. Your research calls visibility the missing link in IoT security. Why is this such a blind spot for enterprises today?
I think it's, when you look at the traditional cellular IoT landscape, when you look at how connectivity management platforms are set up, for example, you're typically offering a fairly basic solution that monitors just how much data a SIM card is using. And often that particular information is quite delayed, in fact. So really, you're not actually understanding what's happening with all of your connected assets. What endpoints are they talking to? Are there any issues in terms of how they're connecting to the underlying network and so on? So yeah, essentially you have a situation where, okay, you can see your devices are connected or not, but yeah, much more information is a little more difficult to understand.
What kind of threats or breaches typically go undetected because of that lack of visibility?
Yeah, I mean, you could start with something very basic. So I mentioned, delayed information as to how much data particular devices are using. So oftentimes that can be 24 hours or so. So if you have a device that's been compromised, potentially it could go a full 24 hours or even longer, using up massive amounts of data, communicating with unauthorized endpoints you don't want it to. And you could end up with a big bill. Other scenarios are a bit more nefarious, where devices could be compromised. It might start, sending small amounts of data or communicating with other types of endpoints, or even trying to laterally traverse the network and causing, even more damage. So yeah, all of that visibility is essentially the starting point for understanding what's happening on the network there.
Yeah, so enterprises, I mean, we've talked about sometimes there's the misnomer of what security really is. In the corporate IT world, security today equates to like real-time monitoring. It's that whole MDR, managed detection response. In the IoT context, is that what enterprises should also be able to see in order to mitigate risk?
Yeah, I mean, it brings it back to the concept of real time, or let's say near real time, because that's pretty much as close as you get. But first of all, yeah, it's almost a time sensitive aspects. You want that data to be transmitted to whatever platform you're using for observation as fast as possible, so you can understand, if there are any indicators of compromise. You get that information as quickly as possible, and that means you can mitigate the problem as quickly as possible. And visibility goes beyond just understanding how much data an asset is using. It's also understanding which endpoints it's communicating with. Should it be communicating with those endpoints? And even are there any other indicators, looking at the signaling data, for example? Um, are there any issues there that could indicate compromise or malware, something like that? You really need to have a holistic view of the asset to really understand if there are any issues with your device.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting to regulation compliance, you've noted in your report that new laws like the Cyber Resilience Act are raising the bar for IoT accountability. How are enterprises reacting to that shift?
Yeah, I think, there's two things that are happening right now. First of all, the regulatory landscape is perhaps in some ways ahead of where the market is, which is very unusual. These liabilities are coming into force and can result in large scale fines, I think. And on the other hand, you have enterprises embedded in IoT now who are actually becoming quite sophisticated in understanding what these regulations are, and um, and what they expect from their connectivity service provider partners and their technology partners. So I think, when we look at our enterprise and OEM surveys, for example, we're seeing more and more awareness of regulation. We're seeing more and more awareness of the need for security. Security has always been top of mind,
Yeah.
but now I expect my connectivity partners to play a role in mitigating those risks. And that's something that is fairly new, I think.
And you've written that asset visibility builds trust and scale. How are the two connected?
Yeah, I talked just now about enterprise sophistication. Over time, we've seen IoT adoption among enterprises and OEMs growing. And that means that the time or the era, let's say, of proof of concepts in IoT is now passed by. It's poor wording, but hopefully you understand what I mean. So it means that IoT is becoming a crucial part of many businesses' operations. So they have more and more devices out there. And as they rely on those devices for availability as part of their value generation, they need to understand that those assets are not just working and supporting data communications, but supporting data communications in a way that's authorized and trusted.
Yeah. And so, what role does then trust play in enabling more ambitious or cross border IoT deployment?
Yeah, I think if you look back to 2010, there were some very ambitious, let's say, predictions for cellular IoT, multiple billions of devices, but we got to 2020 and it was a fraction of what that prediction was. If you look at the reasons why, aside from the complexity of rolling out IoT, I think a big issue was the fact that cellular networks are perhaps viewed as something separate to traditional IT-owned networks, let's say, and therefore, because providers were not offering that visibility and capability to manage policy and establish trust within that cellular network, that's actually hampered the adoption of cellular IoT. So, as you see these solutions coming more into market that provide that visibility and security, that provides a lever for more and greater IoT adoption in the cellular world.
Yeah. And do you think in what time frame do you think that the cellular IoT space will catch up? Or are you seeing that actually translating now today?
Uh, I think that's already happened. Um, I think when you look at the market, more and more providers are now understanding the need for real-time or near real-time asset visibility, because it's such a powerful tool, not only in the context of security, but, a more broader overarching concept of business intelligence.
Yeah.
Um, and that can help actually move the mindset of what connectivity is away from a pure cost towards a concept of value, and a support for what is today becoming more and more important for businesses in terms of connectivity within your cellular network, as well as connectivity in networks that enterprises actually own.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a really interesting point about just the observability around around insights for business kind of efficiency, operational efficiency. Wh- Can you expound on that? What use cases you've seen? Because I think we talk a lot about security, which of course there's visibility and real time monitoring is critical so
Mhm.
that you can get the bad guys out quicker or the threats out faster. But in terms of just operational efficiency, what are some use cases you're seeing where that visibility and deep insights are helping enterprises today?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of instances where actually large scale deployments of IoT, particular companies have discovered, actually that a large number of their devices were not functioning correctly. Um, and being able to rectify that problem was actually worth millions of dollars to them. So in that context, you have as I mentioned, an understanding of what's happening in the network. I can leverage that information to ensure that operations are actually generating value. There's also the potential to understand, are my devices configured correctly?
Mm.
Because in the IoT world, 3GPP, so third generation partnership project, um, those are difficult technologies for companies traditionally used traditionally used to Wi-Fi, for example, things like that. So to help companies ensure that their devices are configured correctly creates an optimized solution. And then you have more basic things, such as an understanding as, should this device perhaps be on a different rate plan?
Mm.
Can I optimize my costs in some way, for example?
Yeah. Yeah, we had our head of the auto business unit on a couple episodes ago, and he even talks about, just table stakes of OTAs for auto OEMs, and
Mm,
that observability and analytics is critical, um, as that's become kind of the new way for our software defined vehicles, right? There's so many updates. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
let's talk about the cellular paradox. So, cellular IoT is often seen as secure by design, yet your research highlights vulnerabilities. And so, where are you seeing those weak spots?
Yeah. So we touched on this before. I mean, cellular, the network in cellular is often talked about as a black box. Um, and we've talked about visibility already. So, you know, having a black spot means that if you can't observe what's happening in a security context, how can you defend against it?
Mm.
Um, so that's one aspect of it. And, while cellular IoT has a very good security structure in terms of how devices are authenticated on the network, um, a lot of devices are out there on, let's say, foreign networks. So in effect, roaming.
Mhm.
And the interconnect between one mobile network and another one traditionally relies on a concept of trusted partnerships, um, while at the same time using communications protocols that have been used for many decades. So you can see immediately that there are potential weak spots to find a way into the network there. So, from a basic security standpoint, it's more secure than things like Wi-Fi, but there are definitely avenues into the network that can be exploited.
Yeah. Uh, are MNOs and even MVNOs doing enough, do you think, to empower customers with the network level insights that they need?
Uh, I would say no, but I think, among a subset of these MNOs and MVNOs, there's an understanding that that work needs to be done, and work is indeed being done. So I think there's a separation today between a set of innovators, let's say, on the market who are developing solutions for using asset visibility as a sort of baseline for new innovation, whether it's in security or business intelligence and so on. And this all brings it back into the concept of driving value from IoT. If you have a secure IoT solution, you have tools, for example, to mitigate security risks. You put more trust into that network. You could deploy more devices into that network, and you have a lower burden in terms of compliance, for example.
Yeah. As we conclude, let's shift to the future. So if we fast forward the next 3 to 5 years, from your research and data that you've gathered, what do you think IoT security visibility will look like?
I think today, or moving forward, I think there'll be more and more emphasis on building out infrastructure on a distributed scale to support more complex operations. And that will go hand in hand with key integrations and key tooling to provide end customers with visibility of those devices. Because, connectivity today, when you look at it in terms of megabytes and kilobytes, is a commoditized asset. So that's driving innovation from the supply side, and you have demand from the customer side as well. So I think, there'll be a lot of emphasis now on delivering those underlying tools to provide enterprises with visibility for their devices. And if you have the right mindset within your MNO or MVNO organization and be able to speak to the right personas within your customer's demographic, then you have a real tool to potentially sell them security tooling as well.
Yeah, it truly is. It's a framework and a mindset. I have to ask, with emerging technologies like AI-driven threat detection, I'm assuming that just become highly adopted in the future.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely a no-brainer. I think we've already seen that developing over the years. Static rules-based systems are by nature quite clunky and rigid, and don't adapt to things that you don't already know. And that's the problem with security. It's constantly a moving target. Threat actors will always find new avenues, new techniques, and so on. And this is where AI comes in, because it can spot those anomalous behavior patterns and potentially alert customers to issues. So I think AI is certainly a must-have tool in that particular context.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our guest, Steffen Sorrell of Kaleido Intelligence. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Susanna Song, and this is IoT Real Talk.
From all of us at Eris, thank you for listening to IoT Real Talk. We hope you'll join us again for more real stories from real practitioners shaping the future of IoT. Tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, or visit eris.com/IoT podcast.